In the 1400s, Europe was struggling. The Black Death had killed millions. Wars between kingdoms were common. Most people were poor and cities were small and crowded. Compared to the rest of the world, Europe didn't seem very powerful. Meanwhile, the East was booming. In India, great kingdoms like the Delhi Sultanate and Vijayanagar Empire were trading in spices, cotton, and gold. In China, the Ming dynasty had massive cities, strong navy fleets, and advanced technology. The Ottoman Empire, based in modern-day Turkey, had taken over Constantinople and now controlled key land trade routes between Asia and Europe. These empires were connected through huge trading networks. Goods moved by land and sea, from India and China through the Middle East to North Africa and Europe. But there was a problem for the Europeans. The Ottomans didn't want Christian kingdoms in Europe to trade freely through their lands. They taxed goods heavily or blocked trade entirely. So Europe needed a new way to reach Asia. Portugal took the lead. In the late 1400s, they sent ships south around Africa. In 1498, Vasco da Gama finally reached the Indian coast. He found spice markets, wealthy ports, and strong local kingdoms. The Portuguese started setting up trading posts and built forts along the coast to protect their ships and goods. Over time, they gained control over key trade routes, and their wealth quickly grew. Other countries in Europe, like Spain, the Netherlands, France, and England, wanted to do the same. But remember, at this point, they only wanted to trade, not take over land. When Vasco da Gama reached India, he didn't find empty land waiting to be discovered. He found a country that was already rich, powerful, and deeply connected to the world. India had been trading with other parts of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East for thousands of years. Its spices, fine cotton, silk, ivory, and precious stones were in high demand. From the ports of Gujarat, Malabar, and Bengal, goods were shipped to Arab traders, Persian merchants, and even to China and Southeast Asia. An Italian traveler who visited India in the early 1500s once said, "India has everything that is rare and precious in the world." This was the place the Europeans had dreamed of, a land of gold and spices. To them, reaching India meant fame, fortune, and power. But while India was ready to trade, it wasn't ready for invasion. That idea of taking control would come later and slowly. Once word got out that Portugal had reached India, the race was on. Europe had finally found a way to get spices and riches without passing through the Ottoman Empire. Spices like pepper, cloves, and cinnamon were worth a fortune in Europe, even more than gold at times. After Vasco da Gama reached Calicut in 1498, the Portuguese quickly set up trading posts and forts along India's west coast. In 1510, they took over Goa, which became their main base in Asia. They didn't just trade, they also used force when needed to control the spice routes and demand favorable deals. For a while, the Portuguese had a head start, but soon other European countries joined the race. The Dutch came next. Their powerful Dutch East India Company set up ports and trading posts across Asia. The French formed their own company and built bases in places like Pondicherry. And finally, the British showed up, creating the East India Company in 1600. They started by trading spices and cotton on India's east and west coasts. Each of these European powers built factories, trading centers, signed deals with local rulers, and competed fiercely with one another. At this stage, most of them still came to trade, not to rule. But soon that would begin to change, especially for the British. The British East India Company wasn't a country. It didn't have a king or a queen. It was just a business, a group of merchants from London who got a royal license to trade with Asia. When it was founded in 1600, the company's goal was simple: buy and sell goods, especially spices, silk, cotton, and tea. They set up trading posts in coastal Indian cities like Surat, Madras, and Calcutta, and slowly started making deals with local rulers. But something made the East India Company different from most businesses. It had its own army. To protect its warehouses and ships, the company hired Indian soldiers, called sepoys, and trained them in European-style warfare. Over time, this army grew bigger, not just for defense, but to gain more control. In the mid-1700s, the Mughal Empire, which had ruled most of India, was weakening. Local rulers were fighting for power. It was the perfect chance for the company to step in. The company had already built a strong base in Calcutta, which was part of Bengal, a region known for its fertile land, busy ports, and booming textile industry. Bengal was one of the richest parts of India, and whoever controlled it could make a lot of money through trade and taxes. But things turned tense when the new Nawab, governor of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, grew suspicious of the company's growing power. He attacked Calcutta and took over a British fort. The company used this as a reason to fight back, but their real goal was to take control of Bengal. In 1757, near a small village called Plassey, the East India Company fought a war against Siraj-ud-Dowlah. This was a business fighting a kingdom, but the battle was already rigged. The company bribed one of the Nawab's commanders, Mir Jafar, to switch sides. The Nawab lost, and the company took control of Bengal, one of the richest provinces in India. This battle changed everything. The company stopped being just a trading group and started acting like a ruling power. After winning Bengal at Plassey, the East India Company realized something important. It could use its army to take more land and make more money. Soon they started collecting taxes from Bengal and using that money to hire more soldiers and expand their army. With more power, the company began to fight other kingdoms across India. They weren't the only foreign power in India. The French were also trying to grow their influence, so the company fought them in several battles, especially in the south, and eventually pushed them out. Next came wars with powerful Indian kingdoms. The Mysore Kingdom in the south, led by Tipu Sultan, fought fiercely to stop British control, but after 4 wars, Tipu was killed in 1799. The Maratha Empire, which ruled large parts of central India, was defeated after a series of long and bloody wars. The company also used tricks, like signing unfair treaties or taking over land when a king died without an heir. This was called the Doctrine of Lapse. By the early 1800s, the company controlled most of India, not by trading, but by fighting wars, breaking alliances, and playing Indian rulers against each other. It had become more than a company. It was now acting like an empire. After conquering more land, the East India Company no longer behaved like a business. It became a ruthless machine, focused only on making money, no matter the cost to the people of India. Indian farmers were forced to grow cash crops like indigo, opium, and cotton, things that were sold in Europe for profit. These crops couldn't feed families, but even during droughts or failed harvests, the company demanded full taxes in cash. If farmers couldn't pay, they lost their land. Many were thrown into debt. Some had to sell their children to survive. Villages that had been self-sufficient for generations fell into hunger and poverty. The worst came in Bengal in 1770. That year, a horrific famine swept across the region. Crops failed, food disappeared, but the company didn't stop tax collection. They even exported rice and grain out of Bengal while people were starving. As many as 10 million people died, about 1/3 of Bengal's population. Romesh Dutt, a British Indian civil servant and historian, wrote, "Not a single boatload of rice was allowed to enter Bengal, though people were dying in the streets." Famine wasn't an accident. It was the result of brutal policies designed to keep money flowing to Britain, even if it meant death for Indians. And it didn't happen just once. Multiple famines followed in the 1800s and early 1900s, killing millions more. Each time, the British either did nothing or made things worse by continuing to export food, shut down local relief, or blame the victims. At the same time, India's economy was being hollowed out. The money Britain took was staggering. Between 1765 and 1938, modern economists estimate that the British drained £45 trillion, in today's value, from India. Meanwhile, India's share of global GDP dropped from 23% in 1700 to just 3% by 1947. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a system of organized cruelty, and the scars of it are still felt today. For nearly 100 years, the East India Company had taken everything it could from India: land, money, food, and lives. But eventually, the people had had enough. In 1857, something big happened. A spark turned into a fire. The first major revolt against British rule. It started with Indian soldiers, called sepoys, who served in the company's army. The immediate reason was small. The British had given them new rifle cartridges, rumored to be greased with cow and pig fat. This was deeply offensive to both Hindus and Muslims. When some sepoys refused to use the cartridges, they were arrested and punished. The anger exploded. The revolt began in Meerut, near Delhi, and quickly spread across northern India. Soon it wasn't just about the cartridges. It was about years of cruelty, lost honor, and a burning desire for freedom. Indian rulers, soldiers, and common people joined the fight. For a while, it seemed like the British might lose, but the company called in reinforcements from Britain. After months of brutal fighting, the revolt was crushed with extreme violence. Villages were burned. Rebels were executed publicly. But the shock was too great to ignore. The British government blamed the company for the disaster. In 1858, the East India Company was officially shut down. India was now ruled directly by the British Crown. This marked the start of the British Raj, a new chapter of colonial rule, with a queen instead of a company. The revolt didn't bring freedom, not yet, but it planted a seed. A message was sent, loud and clear. The Indian people would not stay silent forever. The East India Company was gone, but the exploitation didn't end. It simply changed its name. After 1858, the British government took direct control of India. This period was called the British Raj, and it lasted for almost 90 years. Now, India wasn't being ruled by merchants. It was ruled by the Queen of England, and later by the British Parliament. But the goal remained the same: take resources from India to build Britain's wealth. Taxes were still high, farmers were still poor, and whenever famine hit, the British rulers did little to help, sometimes even exporting food out of India while people starved. India's industries were never rebuilt. Its economy was shaped to serve British needs, to supply raw materials and buy British goods, and the loot continued. Between 1765 and 1938, historians estimate that £45 trillion worth of wealth, in today's value, was taken from India. India, once a land of builders, thinkers, traders, and artists, was left broken, poor, and hungry. It all started with a trading company. No king, just ships, guns, money, and a ruthless plan. The East India Company didn't just trade in India. It took India one war, one deal, one betrayal at a time. And for nearly a century, it ruled not as a guest, but as a master. It's one of the strangest, darkest stories in history. A company ruled a country and got away with it.